What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. So I've been looking over our coaching staff. I've been, deeply entrenched into the 2024 NFL draft class. And I can't help but think that as much as I want a quarterback in this draft class, and as much as I think that we realistically need one, seeing as how we didn't go out and trade for a guy like a Sam Howell with some high upside and already seeing how he's produced in the NFL in a decent enough sample size, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here, right? You take a look at this coaching staff. We've made a few changes. Wide receiver room, Sean Jefferson is our new coach there. Running back room, we have Tony Dews, holding the fort down there. So, I would consider those guys potential upgrades, at least in relation to what we saw, right? Historically bad offense. We know all of the terrible stats and how things have went for us last year. Although to be fair, I was still a Zach Ozani fan. I don't think he got a fair enough shot, but nonetheless, on paper, it looks like upgrades, especially from an experience standpoint and being able to handle potential multiple duties. The names that we expected to try to go out and replace didn't even get touched. Nathaniel Hackett, Robert Saleh still in place, Keith Carter, the major one outside of Nathaniel Hackett. And then you take a look at a guy like Todd Downing. And now we're getting the reports after the NFL owner meeting. Robert Saleh was able to go out there and speak and touch base on some things, and we didn't even fully complete our offensive roster rebuild, right? In that coaching staff room, Robert Saleh mentioned specifically he likes to kind of have a three-headed monster, if you will, in that room. That meaning a quarterback coach, passing game coordinator, and then some kind of senior assistant position, right, or a senior advisor, whatever you want to technically label it as. For example, we had Matt Cavanaugh, and then we had why is the name escaping me? Sorry guys, name's completely escaping my mind right now, but Greg Knapp. There we go. Unfortunate biking accident that took him, away from everybody. But outside of that, we haven't had that exact one-on-one replacement, which means Robert Saleh highlighted not only is Nathaniel Hackett going to be taking on some kind of big role, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. He specifically highlighted Todd Downing as not only still being passing game coordinator, but he's also going to take on the essential duties of being the quarterback coach. Right now, Aaron Rodgers, not as big of an issue, right? He's essentially coached up the coaches last year, and that's from the word of mouth of everybody. And then you have a respective veteran that we just signed in Tyrod Taylor. So those two guys you don't have to worry about. Now, we've heard the thoughts of Woody Johnson that if a trade doesn't happen, we're going to hold tight on to Zach Wilson. For the love of God, I don't want that to happen. Yes, he still has upside, but we've ruined this man. Not only physically, we've ruined the man mentally, we've ruined him spiritually. You got Woody Johnson trying to backtrack comments that we didn't have a backup quarterback at all to probably build up some kind of trade value for Zach Wilson, where he recently mentioned that he still believes he has a ton of potential to be a starter in the league and all this kind of stuff, right? You essentially feel like those were just trade politic kind of talk. So it brings me to the draft, right? Again, we didn't go and trade for somebody with high upside, and the remaining quarterback pool doesn't look great to try to just say, let's throw a dart at a young guy there. And I'm not comfortable keeping the room at just Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor, right? Aaron Rodgers coming off the Achilles. Now, I do think the work that he put in last year showed that he should come back even better relative to a person that usually suffers from that injury. And then with Tyrod Taylor, respected career, but he is a guy that's kind of proven to be as the Chinese would say, when they put together broken vases and stuff, they refix it with gold, right? He gets better as it seems even after all of his injuries, but he still seems to be pretty injury prone. So not comfortable necessarily just sticking with him either right now. Whether you want to actually keep a solid third quarterback on the roster, or you want to just draft that guy and he ends up being potential practice squad placeholder, or you end up using them as your emergency quarterback option. Nonetheless, I think you need that guy in the room, right? The mindset that I have with this whole conversation when it comes to drafting a quarterback is that essentially there's going to be some guys, right? You take a look at a guy like Joe Milton, who we'll break down in a moment. Joe Milton is a guy, tons of physical tools. Excuse me. Could, if everything worked out, be a great starter in the league, right? Then you have other guys that we'll talk about, like Michael Pratt. He's a guy not heavy on tools, and so his ceiling isn't necessarily going to be starter. It's going to be a quality backup role, right? And that's kind of my mindset here is, let's shoot for the stars. That's all great. But any quarterback that we're bringing in, just assume that their ceiling is going to be backup quarterback, right? You already have the question marks, and I kind of get a sense of what the Packers fans have been trying to tell us, right? Aaron Rodgers went from saying, let's make this maybe a potential year-by-year situation to, hey, I'm going to commit 2 to 3 years to the Jets. Now you have him saying, hey, I might feel good enough to go 4 or 5, 6 years, right? Non-committal at best in anything, and so I can easily see how the Jets, who have been devoid of any kind of real success, especially if Aaron Rodgers brings us a Super Bowl, will be kind of hamstrung to his will, right? This is a guy that is turn things around for the Jets, and now we're just going to try to walk away from him, right? It's not going to look great in headlines. Woody Johnson, I'm sure, will want to kind of ride that train till the wheels fall off. But we're in a predicament now where you already didn't really trust this coaching staff prior to the changes coming, right? And for those that maybe loved Zach Izzani or loved I can't even remember our running back coach's name anymore. But nonetheless, if you love those guys and didn't necessarily care for the replacements, it is what it is, right? But nonetheless, that coaching staff has done nothing to earn the respect of not only other coaching staffs in the league, but even their own fan base, right? Plenty of us question what we'll be able to do in terms of developing anybody on that side of the ball. Which brings me to my point. Is it even worth wasting the pick to draft a quarterback, even if it ends up turning out to be a Mr. Irrelevant selection, when ultimately they're already not going to get a ton of reps, but then you now have Todd Downing, who's going to have that added role on top of trying to get the passing game going. And again, you have Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor there, so maybe the starting and second string unit kind of essentially runs themselves, but that's not going to fly in a professional setting, right? If you guys have had any kind of career corporate type job, right, you can't excuse me, you're not really going to be able to kind of BS your way through that and just say, hey, those guys got it, I'm just going to focus on this little teeny tiny area over here for all the stuff that we're getting paid. Not going to happen. So how much attention will a rookie be able to get, for one? Two, you're talking about a day 3 selection here. So in general, the script on these guys is that they're either going to be high on tools, they're going to be low on, maybe some character issues or something. There's going to be a high level of inconsistency, and then you may run into huge issues like, locking on the receivers, not being able to progress through, your wide receiver depth chart, selling passes, accuracy issues, all these kind of things, right? You're only going to get so many reps as a third quarterback, for one, and two, from my understanding, kind of seeing previous quarterbacks and stuff talk about this stuff, you don't get necessarily a ton, buttload of face time with your position coaches, either relative to what the starters and even the second string guys are going to get, and even they're wanting more, right? So maybe flight school kind of helps curve a lot of that. But I wouldn't expect a Brock Purdy type residence or anything crazy here for the Jets. So I personally will say still shoot for the stars, right? Michael Pratt, Joe Milton, those are 2 names being widely connected to the Jets in day 3. Take a look at Michael Pratt, for instance, out of Tulane. He's holding the record books over there for passing yards and touchdowns, I believe, over the course of his career. 3-time champ. you take a look at him. He does pretty well with his touch ball, which is not something you can say for even a ton of round one quarterbacks, right? Relatively speaking. So you love that aspect, but there is a lot of drawbacks with him as well. Accuracy issues. He's a guy that struggles to move through his progressions as well. Doesn't have the greatest arm, right? There's just a whole lot of stuff in terms of looking at his ceiling. There's not physically imposing tools or anything. High quality backup, as we talked about. Joe Milton, kind of his inverse, right? One of the livest arms coming into the league in a long time, right? You look at him, he looks like he's playing around, just kind of dropping 70-yard bombs. And not necessarily in the same way you see him from like an Anthony Richardson, right? Where he's just kind of like throwing it super high up, it's going to hit the ceiling and still be, drop into a bucket 6 yards down the field. But there's the book on him, I would say, is open, right? The plus with Joe Milton, even though there's a lot to not love, he's not coming from that Volunteers offense. Isn't close to any other offense really in college football, let alone translating any of that to the NFL, right? So you're talking about kind of having a blank canvas here. It could be a really great thing for a coaching staff that feels like they have a great plan for a guy. They know what they're doing. He just needs to invest the time. And that could be a huge setback. Take a look at the Jets and what we've done with quarterbacks in recent history. That's not a plus. You want a guy as close to being a perfect prospect as possible. That's not Joe Milton. He's going to throw the ball far. He's going to throw the ball hard. He's going to throw the ball extremely fast. And that's kind of the book on him, right? It's worth mentioning that a lot of people in the NFL circles wanted to kind of push that Lamar Jackson conversation of, hey, are you willing to convert to, let's say, even a tight end position? I think he's in that 6'3 to 6'4 plus realm, and I want to say he's around 225, but it could be 240-ish. That's probably pushing it, but you can envision a tight end build out of a guy like Joe Milton if his career doesn't work out. To me, a positive career arc for him probably looks very similar to what you see out of the Saints quarterback Taysom Hill, right? He's a guy that can throw a little bit, get you some big plays either through the air or on the ground. He can kind of be used in that running back role, wildcat formations. You can use him as a tight end, eligible receiver type stunt. There's a lot you can do with him if you're a creative guy, but I don't know if the development will necessarily be there for him even over the full, course of a full 2 to 3 year period. But you can definitely hope so, right? And if we build this up the right way, the depth on the offense will be secure to where he's being able to play with quality players and stuff still. So nonetheless, I say all that to say, let me know where you guys stand on this whole quarterback debate in the draft. Is it worth the Jets investing a resource at that position just to give it a shot, right? Quarterback is one of those positions that Patriots made famous for having a pipeline for, right? Tom Brady was the guy year in and year out without a doubt, but they consistently were able to draft guys and get them developed, shine enough during preseason, maybe get some regular game action where they're blowing out guys, and then they flip them elsewhere. And they're either getting a steady source of resources from these guys, or worst case scenario, they don't pan out and they're just kind of recycling. But they kind of built a formula. I think the Jets need to follow kind of that same path. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you again. Peace.